Today, we're going to unpack a story that's really two stories in one. On the surface, there's a deeply disturbing, very real mystery. Some of America's top scientists are dying or just disappearing. But underneath that is this huge, complex political theory that argues these events aren't random at all. It claims they're part of a deliberate strategy called Project Alien Redaction. So let's just jump right in with a question that has kicked off a formal investigation in Washington, D.C. Why are some of the country's most brilliant scientists, people working at the very heart of its most sensitive projects, suddenly and mysteriously vanishing? Look, we're not talking about one or two tragic, isolated incidents. When you lay it out on a timeline, a pattern starts to emerge that's hard to ignore. From a NASA scientist at the Jet Propulsion Lab to a world-renowned fusion expert at MIT. Some of them disappeared without a trace, just gone, leaving their phones and wallets behind. Others died under very strange circumstances, sometimes with the cause of death kept completely under wraps. I mean, each case on its own is a tragedy for a family. But when you see them all together like this, it paints a really, really unsettling picture. And here's what really kicked this into high gear. The connection between all these people. They weren't just academics. They had access to some of the most classified research in the nation. We're talking about the absolute nerve centers of America's nuclear, aerospace, and energy secrets. Places like NASA's JPL and the legendary Los Alamos National Lab. The stakes just couldn't be higher. Okay, so a pattern like this, it doesn't just fly under the radar. Things have officially escalated. We're now talking about a formal probe in Washington. The House Oversight Committee is on it, and they're demanding answers and briefings from the FBI, the Department of Energy, and NASA. They are taking this extremely seriously. And this quote from the committee's chairman, James Comer, it really says it all. He flat out says it's very unlikely that this is a coincidence. This has moved way beyond internet speculation. When Congress starts calling something a national security threat, we're in a totally different ballgame. All right, so we've got the official story, the federal investigation, but now we're going to take a sharp turn. We're diving into a wildly different way of looking at all this. It's a theory from a political analysis group that tries to reframe everything we've just talked about through a concept they call Project Alien Redaction. So what on earth is Project Alien Redaction? Well, the theory says it's a political strategy that works completely backwards from what you'd expect. Instead of putting on a big show to make you believe something, it does the exact opposite. It takes things away. It creates meaning by creating gaps, absences, things that are obviously missing, all to build up what it calls an alien aura. The best way to get your head around this is to compare it to an older theory, Project Bluebeam. That was all about a huge fake spectacle, right? A positive signal, like a fake alien invasion. Perfect for the old-school broadcast TV era, where everyone watched the same thing. But Project Alien Redaction, the theory argues, is built for today, for the internet era. It doesn't give you one big thing to look at. It gives you dozens of little, nagging gaps that make us do the work, sending us all down rabbit holes trying to connect the dots. So how would this actually work in practice? Well, the whole theory really boils down to one key mechanism, something called the negative signal. Okay, a negative signal. It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. It's any gap that's so obvious, it just screams for your attention. A classified document, a delayed report, an unexplained death. According to this analysis, it's so powerful because our brains are basically hardwired to solve puzzles and fill in the blanks. And this strategy just leaves the most important blank empty, on purpose, knowing we can't help but try to figure it out. All right, here's a fantastic real-world example. Back in March 2026, the White House registered the domains alien.gov and aliens.gov. But if you actually went to those sites, nothing. It was a portal to nowhere. They made the container, the URL, super visible, but the content was completely missing. And that created this powerful negative signal, a digital waiting room that just cranked up the speculation. Or how about this one? In April 2026, a list of 46 UAP videos requested by Congress gets circulated. We could all see the tantalizing file names, things like Syrian UAP instant acceleration, but the videos? Nowhere to be seen. They gave us the menu, but they wouldn't let us see the food. And that just makes you wonder even more about what's going on in the kitchen, right? The absence of the footage became the story. And this is where the theory makes a really bold, maybe even shocking connection. It argues that the way the Jeffrey Epstein files were handled, with all the blacked out names, the partial releases, the missing logs, wasn't just about that one case. It was a rehearsal, a method test for this exact kind of strategy of managing information by withholding it. And when you lay it out side by side, you can really start to see the logic they're pointing to. The theory argues that a black bar redacting a name in a document is basically the same kind of political tool as an unexplained death that redacts a person's life story, or an empty government website that redacts an entire archive. Each one creates a visible hole that practically begs us to speculate about what's being hidden. Which brings us all the way back to where we started, back to the missing scientists, back to the very human part of this story. This is where the abstract theory of redaction stops being a thought experiment and gets chillingly real. This is what the theory calls the culmination of the strategy, the redaction of actual human beings. This is probably the single most powerful line in the whole analysis. The logic of the blacked-out document, the missing file, is now being applied to a person's life. The missing file becomes the missing person. The black bar is no longer just drawn on a piece of paper, it's drawn over an entire biography. So, according to this idea, the pattern isn't created by a single murder weapon or method, it's created by a grammar of different types of absence. For example, institutional redaction is when a person becomes significant only because of their connection to a high-security place like Los Alamos. Or object left behind redaction, when someone vanishes but their car or phone is still there, creating this sharp, defined edge around the empty space they left behind. Even a death certificate with an undisclosed cause of death acts as a kind of biographical black bar, redacting the final chapter of their story. So, what's the big picture here? What are we supposed to make of all this? Well, the theory of Project Alien Redaction is really suggesting a fundamental shift in how the politics of information works. A shift away from the power of what is shown to the power of what is deliberately and strategically left out. And if you take this theory to its absolute sharpest point, its maximal hypothesis, it gets pretty intense. The claim is that these aren't just convenient coincidences being taken advantage of. It posits that this is an organized, curated strategy. And the very fact that the cases are all so different, that's part of the design. It's a kind of camouflage that creates an aura of controlled inexplicability. So let's just boil it down one last time. The old blue beam idea was fragile, right? You debunk one fake image and the whole thing falls apart. But alien redaction is resilient. It's a strategy perfectly suited for our current media landscape. It turns us, the public, from passive spectators into active pattern hunters. It leverages our natural desire to connect the dots across a field of absences they've curated. And even if one of these strange cases gets explained away, the overall unsettling pattern still remains. It all boils down to this one simple idea. It's not about showing us the alien. It's about meticulously and powerfully showing us the place where the alien is supposed to be, but isn't. The strategy projects the absence itself. And that's really the question we're left with. We're absolutely drowning in data, in images, in information. But this whole theory forces us to ask, in an age of information overload, has the most powerful political tool become the thing that is strategically and silently removed from the picture?